I usually have a pretty hard time when it comes to choosing favorites, and that's especially true when it comes to games. Oh sure, if I'm lucky, I can pick some of my favorite games in specific genres, but most of the time, both my inability to make a clear decision and lack of playing the well-known titles results in me just going, I don't know. However, one game has luckily enough fixed that problem for me. That game being the legendary indie title, Hollow Knight. It took a pretty long while before I actually started playing Hollow Knight, but when I did, it quickly grabbed my attention purely due to the charm it had to offer. Its areas, enemies, characters, NPCs, dialogue, and most fitting for today's video, its bosses. Hollow Knight's bosses are, for the most part, great, and many are cooked to near perfection. But with everything such as this, of course there are going to be differing opinions, which surprisingly aren't all that different in this case. Don't get me wrong, boss rankings still do have their differences, but when looking at their top 5, it usually is just the same 5 bosses. And because of this, there has always been one boss that I felt like never got the recognition they properly deserved. One boss in particular that barely anyone talks about, and when they are the topic of discussion, there usually isn't much said. Judging from my usual horror-based content, you would think that this boss would be Nosk. Well, I'm more than happy to announce that this video isn't about horror at all, but as you can clearly tell, it's still a topic I care a lot about. Every single thing about Hollow Knight has resulted in a glorious culmination. The Hollow Knight isn't only my favorite boss Hollow Knight has to offer, but I would even go as far to call it my favorite boss of all time. And as I use this video to discuss, analyze, and explain the greatness of every single piece of this boss, hopefully you will understand why I treat it with such utter praise. Sorry for the interruption, but I wanted to announce something important, so please don't skip this. I see you. Okay, I promise I'll be quick. Getting right to the point, I now do commissions. If you like any of these thumbnails or even my other art pieces, my Blue Sky DMs are open, which, by the way, this is my Blue Sky. I technically do have a commission sheet, which is this, though and some of these art pieces are a little outdated. I've gotten better over time, and some of these I even finished within a day. I'll likely make a better sheet later, but for now, this is why I gotta show my prices and all of that. I technically have another important announcement, but that isn't really important. However, if you are interested, it is in the description and likely the pinned comment. With this advertisement to advertise my commission out of the way, I'm not going to add any more waiting, so let's get right back to this adventure of a video. Hollow Knight's difficulty certainly does not stem from any one thing. But through all the obstacle courses and enemies, the bosses are undeniably the main reason people find this game so difficult. Not only do you have bosses like Mantis Lords, Soulmaster, or Brooding Moloch who present an early challenge, but some late game bosses like Failed Champion, All Adjective Zote, and Nightmare King Grim may even take an entire night to beat. And when it comes to challenge, 2 of the game's 3 final bosses do not flinch. And since those 2 final bosses are literally the same person, it's clear that the Hollow Knight is the outlier. Don't get me wrong, he isn't stupidly easy. Dying to him a few times is completely understandable. But when you compare him to the Dream bosses or even the Watcher Knights, it's clear that the Hollow Knight is a bit of a pushover. However, to assume he's a bad boss because of this would be foolish. Hollow Knight has already shown itself to make easy bosses very fun to fight against. The Hollow Knight is not only the same in this aspect, but as you will later see, their easy difficulty is a reason I adore this boss. But for now, let's talk about entertainment. Hollow's entertainment value partly stems from the type of boss they are. In the midst of cruel, giant, relentless foes, some bosses instead opt for a more duelist approach. These types of bosses rely on a variety of attacks to keep you on your toes. Pair this with a fencing-like gameplay loop, and it's no wonder why these bosses are considered to be some of the most entertaining. And while Hollow Knight does fit the criteria, that isn't to say he's one-to-one. While many of these bosses attack at quick succession, Hollow takes his time. Not only does this help you with your survivability as a whole, but it makes Hollow very exploitable. And since Hollow's attacks don't do double damage, if you do get hit, it's no big worry. And trust me, that's a big if. With how far you have come in your journey, reading Hollow's Telegraph should have come naturally after a few attempts. Thus, you really only need to know how you should approach bosses like this and have enough items to hold your own. If you have either of those, then this phase shouldn't be much of an issue. Keyword, phase. One of the main reasons why I find this fight so enjoyable is its different phases. While Hollow Knight does have several bosses with different phases, it is a rare sight to see, especially when it comes to these warrior-like bosses. This new phase fits perfectly, not only as a continuation of the boss fight, but it works well when you look at the boss in its entirety. Hollow's new phase keeps the same catalog of enjoyable attacks and expands upon said catalog by adding 2 new ones. Now he can shoot projectiles at an arc and even do a slam which causes pillars to shoot from the floor below. Both of these new attacks provide much more danger, as they either are difficult to dodge or deal double damage. But these attacks far from ruin the fight. They don't cause a major difficulty spike, and they fit very snugly with all the other moves. And with this, these new attacks provide an entertaining escalation to the battle. It's just fun fighting an opponent who is gradually getting stronger. It makes you want to continue to see how the fight escalates even further. How foolish of you. This phase gives half of the Hollow Knight community PTSD. For good reason. Throughout this entire game, you have fought through countless bosses, and many have left their own special impact on you. Whether it was the build-up, challenge, mystery, putridness. Many bosses have had their emotional value that was entirely unique. And with that being said, none of those moments could even begin to compare to this. Seeing this for the first time caused me to be a deer in headlights. All of my Hollow Knight experience was ripped away from me as I had trouble believing what I was seeing. And as I'm sure you all can guess, this mere action not only causes you to book your therapist for 2 hours, but it also makes the fight incredibly easy. Hollow wastes a lot of time doing this. Time which allows you to do essentially 2 things. You can either heal if you have the soul, or you can get a lot of damage on him. And while yes, you only do 1 damage, his health is shown to compensate for that. And since this isn't his stagger, you can get as many hits as you want. And even then, this still gives you a lot of soul in the grand scheme of things, which means that you will always have an opportunity to heal if you save your soul. Cause you have to remember, dying is still a small possibility, especially with Hollow now introducing 2 brand new attacks. These new attacks are more difficult to dodge and can catch you off guard, but while they are difficult, they are certainly not known for that. Each of these attacks are sad, disturbing, and depressing all at once. Sure, some of the other bosses had attributes that are either disgusting or disturbing, but it is nearly impossible to compare those with what this boss delivers. The first attack to discuss is when Hollow gets ragdolled by the bubbles of infection inside him. These bubbles force him to flow into possession like Post as he spews out infection to damage you. The other attack follows the previous one, but replaces the projectiles with slams across the ground. As I said, no other attack in Hollow Knight can compare to these. Name all the slamming and projectile spam attacks you want, but these, my god, they hit different. Along with these attacks aren't overly hard either, and they give you plenty of time to see what's happening to Hollow. It's near impossible to go through this fight and not bring the majority of your attention on these 2 attacks. Even though this phase makes the fight feel like it's low, we're still not finished, and trust me, things get way worse. Hollow utters 1 more roar and enters their final phase. But rather than adding new attacks like all the other phases, this part pretty much removes all but 2. These 2 attacks consist of Hollow's gut-wrenching slam, as well as their swing attack, which could barely be called such. This phase is by far the easiest, not only because of the limited attack pool Hollow has available, but because both of these attacks causes him to stagger. And if that wasn't bad enough, Hollow usually follows up these staggers with his self-harming that we're all too familiar with. What is shown here is a warrior that's on their final breath. A once proud warrior who is both exhausted and distraught over what has become of them. This warrior now just wants to end their suffering, and you have beaten them up so bad that even the infection can't keep this shell standing. It is a crime to not feel absolutely horrible at this point. The fight now went from something exciting and entertaining to sad and unappetizing. The more this phase goes on, the more you feel like you don't deserve to win. The grand feeling of this fight has essentially been drained, as you don't even feel like what you're doing is the majority of the damage. But what's absolutely evil is when you finally put this creature out of his misery, when you land that last blow and get told to use focused, you feel energized once again, thanks to this realization. While you may be hesitant, you eventually succumb to peer pressure, and as you hold that focus button, everything around you intensifies. Things feel energized again. Hell, even the screen starts breaking. But just as quickly as it came, it's all gone. The tension of what follows has been played like a fiddle. We were expecting an epic finale, but all we got was this depressing and sad ending. Everything has become a husk of what it once was, it has lost all enjoyment, and that comes with the realization. Our protagonist is trapped by chains, and then we realize that the Hollow Knight, the thing that we just fought, that's what we will grow up to be. Something that hates its existence, yet is forced to live out a painful servitude. Depressing doesn't even begin to describe it. It should feel good. You beat the game, but you don't feel anything. And that is the masterpiece behind this boss. The boss starts off as an entertaining yet still tense duel. You feel a sense of fulfillment for even getting this far in your journey. The attacks don't make for an overbearing fight, and you always feel like you're getting somewhere. This is not a fight that's meant to make you clench your teeth, but rather it's a battle designed to give you more determination with each death. And the second phase doubles down on this concept thanks to the escalating difficulty. But when that third tragic phase strikes, you can kiss any and all enjoyment behind. Going back into this fight after death no longer gives you determination, but rather a sense of fear. The new attacks that are introduced aren't those of a warrior, but rather a corpse. Hollow even screams in agony during one of his attacks. The more and more this phase continues, the more you feel like you don't deserve to win. This fight gave you free heals, free damage, all on a silver platter. The biggest fulfillment you could feel now is giving Hollow a mercy killing and nothing else. Thus, the ending is all the more unattractive. Let's take a second and imagine this boss was at least as hard as the Watcher Knights. Would you feel as depressed? Yeah, sure, Hollow self-harm would still hit you like a freight train, but afterwards, the difficulty may have blinded you to those feelings. How can you feel sad for a boss when they are killing you almost all the time? Even if only the first phase was like that, the final phases would feel like more than a break than anything. And overall, you would still feel accomplished for not giving up after a hard boss. But thanks to the overall easy difficulty, your win feels undeserved. I'm impressed that Team Cherry was able to recognize the possible problems of a hard boss. There's always a point in a difficult section where it blinds your perception of all other emotions. I've seen this issue many a time. You may have a scary, sad, energizing portion of a game that is really well done, but if that section is too difficult, the experience can quickly become boring and triggering. But rather than fitting in with most other bosses, the Hollow Knight doesn't try to be difficult. If someone were to ask me how to make a strong emotion be invoked in a fight, this is what I would show them. However, that's not just because of the gameplay. I would even say that the gameplay is a key factor in this emotional impact. I believe the art and music are what hold that privilege. If you're at all familiar with Hollow Knight, I shouldn't have to convince you that this game's art and music is impeccable. Not only is the art style in general very charming, but some of the art just looks downright beautiful. Following suit, the OST is near perfect when it comes to representation. Hollow is exceptional in both categories, with both being 1, extremely well done, and 2, amplify everything THK is meant to achieve. Let's start with the art. Hollow's design is a fun design outright. It's menacing, imposing, and they look exactly what a final boss should look like. Along with this, there are so many details that work in several ways. The one singular crack on their face, their tattered robes, their void-like body having noticeable joints, and their weapon even shows signs of wear. These details not only show you how ancient and withered Hollow is, but the details also make it feel like he's a parallel to you. Another reason why I love these details so much is how they will impact you differently depending on the context you have. At the very start of the fight, these details likely won't mean much to you outside of their ominous nature. But when that infamous third phase starts, when the cracks of the depressing reality start showing themselves to you and you're forced to look upon in absolute horror, these details take on a whole new meaning. Gone are the simple excuses of intimidation. These details were prominent in Hollow's design to show you how long they have been suffering, how many falls they have taken to accomplish their goal, how worn down they are because of all the events that have transpired. It's depressing. And it isn't just these small little details that get affected, it's also the animations. The way Hollow has to walk hunched over with a limp, the way they have to swing around violently to hit you, the way they have to shoot out projectiles, the meaning behind it all changes drastically when that moment arrives. Now, obviously the moment itself is a key factor in how these animations are given a new light, but this switch, along with the boss in general, is improved majorly because of the track that plays during it. While it may not be as catchy as Grimm's several soundtracks, or as heartwarming as something like Green Path, the pure raw emotion is something else. I've seen so many people strictly talk about the sad part of the music, when in reality this entire track is brilliant. Honestly, this track is my main example when it comes to how Hollow Knight handles its music. Even the name Sealed Vessel has something to talk about, as it makes Hollow Knight's current state feel even more depressing, as even their own track has trouble being theirs. But obviously the best part about this track is, well, the music. Now, it would be one thing if this was a track that played during the Hollow Knight boss fight, but nope, its full 5 minutes of pure Ascendant is incorporated throughout the entire thing, from beginning to very end. Not only is that fact very important to something I will address much later, but it also makes this song very fun to listen to. Each separate section encaptures its own emotions, making it also work thematically. So why don't I just go through section by section and tell you why each section works so well. Starting us off, we have the section that plays during the Black Eggs corridor. And well, this is definitely the weakest section, but that doesn't mean it's bad. Sure, it doesn't bring in the same energy or emotional impact as the later sections, but I don't think anyone can make a clear argument stating how this part doesn't fit the hallway well. Its vibrating, ominous whistle captures such a mystical and mysterious tone, while also feeling somewhat powering. Not only does this fit its designated area perfectly, but it captures what we, the player, are likely feeling. We feel empowered with this being the end of our adventure, but we're also questioning what could lie at the end of this hallway. And with those aspects in mind, the next section builds off those feelings perfectly. This part of the track not only raises the proper amount of anticipation, but it works so well in what it's supposed to represent narratively. Imagine a scene about our protagonist uncovering some sort of monster, one that has been sealed away for ages and only now is being uncovered. This musical section fits perfectly with that scene, and since the analogy is pretty much what happens in game, I would say they hit all the right notes. But listening to this while attacking the chains is such a great combo, which each consecutive chain being broken, the music behind us amplifies even more. And when that last chain is broken, you'll come to find that all that build-up was not for no reason. In the oh-so-wise words of Mr. Caffeine Cop,
let me put it in a language you can understand.
If the snippet before was us uncovering a monster, this is us fighting it. It's so intimidating, so imposing, and it commands authority. But even with all those fantastic attributes in mind, they are still only the tip of the iceberg. There are a plethora of music producers and Hollow Knight fans who have analyzed this song to the best of their ability. The reasoning of why I bring that up now is because this is usually the point where that analysis truly takes hold. While watching different analysis videos about Sealed Vessel, I realized that each video had at least one unique detail that no video has mentioned. And the weird part is that all of those unique details feel factual. Thus, Sealed Vessel feels like something that no one can completely grasp. To just call this a cool emotional boss theme when it has so much meaning poured into it would be heresy. While listening to this for your first time, you will likely scrub this off as an intimidating boss theme. Your 10th time, you will likely uncover some of the more emotional elements behind it. But to me, someone who listens to this to hours on end, I feel something different. Yeah, sure, the emotional cores are still there in spades, but that isn't all that's being shown here. It shows how Hollow is trying to break free of the infection. The beginning is all energetic and erratic, but later on there's more emotional, sad impact that feels like it's being punching at the surface. And even if none of this was true, just come on, this is just a fantastic track. Many of the songs in this game are great, but very little are so great that I sing them during the fight. Christopher Larkin is so talented when it comes to music, and he went way too hard for a game about silly little bugs. And if you're somehow still not convinced, the next section should be more than enough evidence to prove my claim. The part you just heard is downright my favorite part of this song, and that's for many reasons. However, the main one is because it delivers on everything that the portion before has set up. This track goes from good to magnificent, and it stays that way. However, one thing can be magnificent in many different ways, which is what the music in the third phase represents greatly. You know how I commented on the fact that the music, when taking a very deep dive at it, explores how Hollow's trying to fight off the infection? Well, this is that coming to fruition. It's just so emotional in many different ways. Not only does it invoke and fit what's happening on screen perfectly, but it's just that there's so much beneath the surface in this minute-long section. Inevitability, restlessness, reflection, suffering, disharmony, and that's just the start. Everything that makes Hollow Knight a character is poured into this melody, and it resulted in magnificence. While the fight itself, as I have explained, is really good, this music makes the fight go from amazing to peak, especially with how it impacts the player. This music contributes a big part of how so much of Hollow Knight's design, animations, everything has such a different impact when you gain new context. Every stumble, every swing, every slam, parry, projectile, it all is treated differently when this part strikes. Hollow's fourth phase doesn't have any changes with the melody because it doesn't need to have them. It's already sad enough. You already got the whiplash you needed. The only difference is that now the strings feel way more dramatic, making the song feel like it's culminating on something. It feels like something is about to end. It's not extremely different because it doesn't need to be, and I'm glad it's kept like that. However, the music after you defeat Hollow Knight doesn't exactly share the same idea. Sure, the same melody is there, but now a choir is opened up. While you may not like it, this is the end. And the music wants you to know that. All of that inevitability, guilt, suffering, regret. There's nothing you can do about it now. You got the bad ending, and you can't right your wrongs. Well, that is until you get up from your bench and have fun again. And thank God you can, because that means you can get to the Dream No More ending and listen to the last minute of this beautiful soundtrack. This might not seem like much, but just picture this. And well, I guess for those who have played the game, relive it. You just fought your toughest foe yet. You got a grand finale, and then all you get to wonder is if it's over. Did you do it? And this music is here to answer you with a resounding yes. That is what this track is. After the bad ending you got, you then tried and fought to get a good ending. And that's what this music is. It's your theme song. And not only that, its melody lets you know positively that everyone in Hallownest can enjoy life in peace. Now, with that entire track covered, I hope you're ready for me to babble on about it again, because there's one more detail I don't think many people have noticed when it came to this track. And the reason why I even mentioned how all of the different bits of music being in one track makes things work thematically. Sealed Vessel tells two tales. Hallownest, and the one I will be more predominantly talking about, Hollow's. Sealed Vessel isn't only Hollow's boss theme, but it's his story. Think about it. The first part that happens in the corridor is empty. So empty, in fact, that the only sound that you can hear are the mystified whispers and their echoes. Much like an early vessel, one that is completely hollow, a creation of pure void. However, later on, this vessel has to fight and climb up the abyss, thus excusing why this hallway leads into the tension-filled part afterwards. And this moment until the third phase is all supposed to reflect Hollow's experience. Being trained, seeing the chaos invoking in Hallownest. And if you remember the details I pointed out about emotion seeping through, then the narrative I'm making right now fits right along with that. That same hidden emotional sentiment that showed how Hollow wanted to break free of the infection is showing emotion starting to seep into this young vessel. And the third phase is when this emotional disaster kicks right off. Why do I know that? Well, the answer is pretty simple. It's the melody. This melody is heard in one other place in the entire game, and that is Path of Pain. Path of Pain, for those who don't know, is the most difficult platforming you will ever experience. And certainly, the most difficult section Hollow Knight has to offer that isn't a boss rush. But this Sawblade-infested trial does indeed have a in-universe reason to exist. It was made by the Pale King to hide his shame, to hide the fact that he may have failed the vessel by giving it emotion. Because he was a father figure, all of his people who he treasured dearly may still be doomed, and that his one child may be unable to reach their goal of being a savior. However, this part isn't relating to the formation of this paternal bond. It's more so of the aftermath. Part of the reason this bond is so depressing is that Hollow knew of the negative ramifications that this relationship could cause. Hollow loved their father, but they also loved Hallownest, and were willing to be a sacrifice if it meant ensuring the kingdom's future. They also knew that being able to think could compromise the survival of their beloved city. That's why this shared leitmotif is here, because like how the Pale King was ashamed of himself for potentially compromising Hollow Nest, Hollow was forcefully keeping himself hollow and failing. And that analogy becomes literal when you take a look at what's happening on screen. This leitmotif is still very much present in the final phase because of how unremovable these thoughts were. They kept persisting, refusing to leave Hollow's mind, forcing them to carry that burden all the way to the Black Egg. The way things are getting more intense parallels how Hollow saw their kingdom, a city that was crumbling more and more because of a disastrous plague. Along with this, these thoughts were only getting more prominent, and throughout all this, Hollow's worst nightmare came alive. They were able to speak, hence why there's a choir. But I could be reaching over to nothing, as I do equally believe that the choir also represents the residents of Hollow Nest. The main reason as to why I think the latter is because after you finish the 4th phase, everything besides the choir stops. This section almost undoubtedly represents Hollow going into the Black Egg, with all the residents of Hollow Nest saluting and honoring them. As I said, Sealed Vessel does tell two tales, and this dual perspective does lead into the final section of this amazing track. Since this section only plays in the Dream No More ending, my parallels are going to be as such. Hollow and the rest of Hollow Nest have awoken, whether that be in Hollow Nest or a unknown afterlife. Hollow Nest, after their confusion, realize that their life is finally at peace, and Hollow Nest is left in a positive, carefree melody as the chaos is finally over. As for Hollow, while this is definitely speculation, after they wake up, they get to see the kingdom free. The people they wanted to free were finally saved. And the ones who are dead, the ones Hollow formed special bonds with, mainly their father, are in the afterlife with him. It's a beautiful and tear-jerking conclusion, and the fact that it's brought to us in song and speculation form, well, I wouldn't have it in any other way. Christopher Larkin, I salute you for creating this masterpiece. Sealed Vessel isn't just Hollow Knight's boss theme for me. It does so much heavy lifting. It makes the scenes even more impactful. It amplifies everything the boss has to offer. And it gave me a realization I was ecstatic to uncover. But this song is far from the only amplifier. There are many miscellaneous things that relate to Hollow's boss fight and how it impacts you. So let's get into them. With the Hollow Knight being a final boss, one of his amplifiers is of course going to be their presence in the game. Since that usually is a given with final bosses, this might seem like an odd thing to point out, but Hollow is a special case. They aren't a relentless figure, they aren't someone you are told much about, they are stationary, and the time where you do fixate on them before the fight is either short-lived or passive. However, with all that in mind, Hollow Knight does an excellent job in handling the build-up to his titular boss. Hollow Knight was a game built to encapsulate everything about Metroidvanias, and thus there's a lot of exploration involved. Everyone has their own pace, everyone has their own style. This would usually leave an imbalance when it comes to specific objectives. However, the Hollow Knight managed to have an everlasting presence no longer how long it takes to get to them. At the start of the game, you see this figure chained up. It's your very first sight of the game. And not soon after you see the Black Egg, a mystery of itself. It's ominous, and there's a whole room dedicated to its entrance. Yet it doesn't go anywhere. As you continue on your adventure, you will likely forget about this place until you stumble upon it, and you are intrigued in its mystery once more. However, after you interact with a shrine at the City of Tears, this place becomes hard to forget about. Every time you open your map, you see a symbol dedicated to this place that you still know very little about. Now, this is when issues regarding pace would usually come up. Either you are just playing to get to the end and then will get everything else after your first playthrough, Or you're a dumbass like me who did so much other stuff that you forgot the Dreamers existed, let alone who this figure was. And it's inspiring to me that both styles don't ruin any of the game's build-up. If you play through the game more linearly, you will be knowledgeable about what the game has told you. Said knowledge will probably leave you to start wondering about the context behind this world. Yeah, the Hollow Knight sacrificed themselves, but why? Why were the Dreamers so important? Who was the Hollow Knight? Thus, you begin to fixate on answering those questions as you defeat the Dreamers, eventually leading you to fight the legendary Hollow Knight in all of their glory. You spent a lot of time waiting for your moment to finally fight this glorious legend, but when said legend starts showing their depressing truth, you are left distraught. Or after meeting the shrine, you decide to go more exploration based, eventually forgetting about it, causing you to look at the symbol full of questions. Who this is, why are they important, what does it all mean? Thus you double your efforts time and time again, eventually fighting the Dreamers, and once you defeat one of them, you quickly get to the rest to finally see what's lurking beneath that ominous temple. And when you finally free Hollow, that boss title hits you with a ton of whiplash, as you thought you were the Hollow Knight all along. And coming off that wave of excitement, you then become horrified as this mystery is dying. The way Hollow's presence lingers throughout the game, no matter how you play it, is wild to me. It fits in perfectly with the rest of the mystery that Hollow Knight's environment is abundant with, and also how its gameplay is meant to be explored. But Hollow's presence isn't strictly confined to before his boss fight. Since Hollow Knight allows you to quickly go back when you finish an ending, you are easily able to search for your good ending in record time. This is where your pace would usually factor in how much of a journey you need to make before you can get your happy ending. And from what I have seen, this game is flexible and matches well regardless of this pace. However, these don't strike me enough to warrant an in-depth analysis about them. Ironically, the one mandatory thing is what warrants that analysis. While I do kind of despise this cutscene for tricking half of the Hollow Knight fanbase to believe that the Pale King was a terrible person, it sets up your good ending perfectly. The Hollow Knight ending, while good, did leave us with some cliffhangers. Hell, it even made me think that this was a time loop scenario. But climbing on top this, seeing your brethren fall, and to finally see Hollow walking away with the Pale King made my jaw drop. Going back into the Hollow Knight fight is no longer just about getting your good ending, it's also about saving your sibling. Because this is the one thing that separates what ending you get, it makes you waste no time. As soon as that reveal is broken, you are free to go to the Black Egg and save everyone. Obviously, this scene is brilliant for more reasons than Hollow. It also builds up the Dream No More ending perfectly. Coincidentally, that's the very next thing I want to talk about. The Dream No More ending might seem like a weird choice considering how it's focused on a completely different final boss. However, Hollow does make an appearance that is more than worthy of being talked about. After you go through a foreshadowed climb and land your final nail hit, Hollow comes out from the grave and assists you in taking down the Radiance. This is perfection. You had to go through Hollow's fight again and again and again, all of the while seeing how much pain they are in. Obviously, it doesn't hit quite as hard as the first time, but since you now know that this is your sibling, it recovers some of the otherwise lost emotional weight. And because of that, it isn't just seeing Hollow come back. It's seeing your dead relative rise up triumphantly to assist you. The game still lets you be the hero, but you get confirmation that what you're doing right now is saving Hollow. It's a tear-jerking sight. However, we still have one more ending to talk about. The Sealed Siblings ending. The Sealed Siblings ending is definitely the weakest in terms of feeling. At this point, you should have already done the Dream No More ending, and all those self-inflicted stabs don't hit nearly as damaging as they once did. But this ending doesn't feel the need to be unique. Instead, it follows up on the high emotional value the other endings, mainly the Dream No More one, had. Knocking Hornet off Hollow is designed to make you feel like a horrible, horrible person. A new salvation for everyone was right around the corner. All it took was one Dream Nail. But instead of being a hero, you just had to eliminate Hornet in hopes of finding a secret special ending. Well, either that or you were just mad that Hornet told you to. I honestly can't tell which one's worse. Hollow and the ending cutscene are nearly identical to the previous ones. It makes you feel horrible, and it rightfully should. You fought Hollow again, possibly killed Hornet, all to find something unique, but you are just met with an ending that deserves to be unsatisfying. Both of these endings may not be directly linked to Hollow's boss fight, but the way their boss is linked to these endings made their desired impacts all the more effective. Hollow's context and their suffering is partly why the Dream No More ending is as satisfying as it is. The possible bright future Hollow had is part of the reason Sealed Siblings ending was so dreadful. But it makes you wonder though. The Hollow Knight was going to be the savior of Hollow Nest, and while you did see them get their happy ending, it makes you wonder how they were in their prime. While the Hollow Knight does do it well, the Fallen Warrior trope has been done plenty of time. Seeing that warrior at full power would be an amazing experience. We only got glimpses of Hollow's prime, so it would be nice if Team Cherry gave us a more clear picture. And thankfully, that's exactly what they did. Where do I even start with this? Pure Vessel is an amazing boss by all extents. It's tense, it's fast-paced, it's energizing, it's just the definition of enjoyable. It takes everything that makes the fencing bosses fun and adds even more. This boss is in everyone's top 5, mine included, and while it doesn't have the same emotional complexity that makes Hollow my favorite, it is still perfection in many, many ways, not just gameplay. So allow me to put light to all. Let's start off with the build-up. Finding the Nail Masters was a wonderful surprise. I don't think a single person was expecting Oro and Matu to just suddenly appear. But with that, guessing the other bosses was sort of easy. I mean, Painter was self-explanatory and there was no one else left, so while Sly was a guess, it was a very educated one. But Knight was too broad to make it any one guess. There were no more Nail Masters and there were many other NPCs who could fit that description. The real only reason you could think it was Hollow is because of the name, and that Hollow was yet to be found. But there were still plenty of other possible guesses. But whether or not you were someone who guessed right or wrong, that reveal gave you goosebumps. This stage entrance is a near definition of exciting. Seeing this beast showing off their strength by exploding their armor right off them before turning around and showing their aggressive fighting stance, to then reveal a sudden twist by letting out a roar of nothing still gives me chills to this day. Who knew no Voice of Christ suffering would be taken this seriously? And the way it matches up with the song is extraordinary. This intro radiates power and aggression, and to expect a roar similar to the Hollow Knight only to be met with this beautiful choir made my bones frozen. And the song in general is just so good. While I have yet to understand why people place this song higher than Sealed Vessel, I can't lie, this track is amazing. It's a nerve-wracking choir made to make every fight with Hollow extremely tense. Pure Vessel is also more than just a tense boss theme, as it has some symbolism to touch on. My English class on Sealed Vessel should have taught you on how Sealed Vessel in its entirety was supposed to show the Hollow Knight as a failed hero. Pure Vessel is the opposite. Its use of angelic voices and instruments is instead supposed to show how Hollowness saw the Hollow Knight, along with Hollow's potential. A shiny soldier worthy of glory, an angelic warrior that will halt the monstrous infection. Even Godtamer believes in that idea, as they call the Pure Vessel a god among gods. The Hollow Knight is a fallen legend. Pure Vessel is that legend before the fall. The gameplay is the most obvious example of that. In Pure's first phase, all his attacks are either the same or greatly referencing Hollow's attacks. In fact, Pure just plays as a faster Hollow Knight who deals double damage. However, there's one big difference that's the reason that these two play so differently. While Hollow oftenly jumps and stumbles across the arena, Pure is different, opting to teleport rather than walk. This phase is what you expect Hollow's final phase to be, a true battle between warriors. And this duel is one you're gonna die a lot on. Throughout each attempt, your determination remains strong to finish this warrior. But if you are going to defeat him, you better learn Hollow's 2 new attacks. Luckily, Pure Vessel isn't just a dream variant of his infected counterpart, and instead has 2 new moves to use, both of which adding a fun challenge to this already difficult fight. Alright, so this boss fight is fun. Wow, very rare opinion to have. But didn't I introduce this boss by referencing the fact that a boss like this would make the OG Hollow Knight fight better? Why would a harder boss fight even affect its easier counterpart? Well, for one, I wanted to shine light onto a boss that I still enjoy, and 2, it's because of the connection these fights have to the character. The Pure Vessel had to be a boss handled well for one sole reason. It was meant to be Hollow in his prime. Pure Vessel was the Hollow Knight we only got glimpses of. The Pure Vessel was the one we heard about, the one we were anxious to fight. To get visual confirmation allows us to compare this fight with the more depressing version. It shows how damaged and broken Hollow is after the infection and everything else that has happened. And Pure Vessel succeeds in this because of how many parallels and conclusions you are able to make. THK was partly easy because of his slow stumbling, however Hollow teleports a lot, and considering it seems to be a void related ability, it makes sense as to why. Pure and Hollow have the same amount of attacks, and for the most part those attacks have very small differences. The floor spikes and nail projectiles were attacks that the infection tried their best to replicate in hopes of keeping Hollow's power. Even the attacks that don't have a match at all show some resemblance of reasoning. The Void and Soul attacks were things that the infection tried to replicate, but were unable to because those attacks were strictly Soul and Void based. Those attacks are also performed at Hollow's core, and the infected attacks, coincidentally, show infection rising up from Hollow's chest. It's not just the attacks either. I've already explained the connection between the 2 tracks, but the entrance and even the defeat have their fair share of connecting dots. Pure Vessel uses all these parallels to show what Hollow could have been, what the Chosen One was meant to be. Fighting Pure and then fighting Hollow is depressing because of how similar the fights are. Pure Vessel was a challenging fight where you are focused on how not to die. Killing Pure is honorable. Hollow, on the other hand, is a depressing matchup and it feels more of a mercy killing than anything else. The irreversible damage the infection done is clear, by limiting Hollow's control of Void and Soul, replacing it with its dreaded Plague. The only reason Hollow had some resemblance of power was because the infection was replicating some of his abilities. While before the only downfall Hollow went through was created by our imaginations, this shows us clearly how much damage Hollow had went through. It is clear as day that Hollow suffered in that temple. That feeling, that tragedy that this fight so clearly paints us, is why Hollow's boss fight is amplified thanks to this one. Everything from the music to the design, the attacks, animation, details, they were all meant to be a contrast to Hollow. It is brilliant in every meaning of the damn word. The Hollow Knight's boss fight has a lot of tough competition. With boss fights like Nightmare King Grim, Sisters of Battle, and even its Pure counterpart, it makes up for a really good argument for why Hollow is not the best boss. And yeah, I understand most of the arguments. I don't even think that the Hollow Knight is the best boss to fight against. But the fact that the emotions, the craft, everything in this fight is so overlooked makes me disappointed in all honesty. This boss, like its namesake, is Hollow Knight. It's the embodiment, the culmination of the emotions the game makes you feel. The stunning music which heightens every part, the combat which has set up for so many fun challenges. Its connection to the rest of the game even furthers this idea. The boss was created masterfully, with such care and precision that it's not only my favorite Hollow Knight boss fight, but one of my favorite bosses of all time. It's the shining example of how to make a sorrowful boss. One that ties in with your story, one that talks and works with your narrative. If you don't want to play against the Hollow Knight in your free time, or don't think it's the best boss, that's fine. But the fact I can classify this boss as underrated is a problem. One I hope this video will fix.